Hello, everyone. We shall wait a bit for everyone to join, but before that, I would like to formally welcome all of you to today's interview. We will have a very fascinating interview today, and I think a lot of our participants will benefit from the knowledge that we shall endeavor to disseminate today. Namely, we will be having an interview with Mr. Scott Heimlich, and he is, of course, the Vice President of Amgen. Amgen is one of the leading biotech companies worldwide. They are present in roughly 100 countries. They have more than 24,000 employees, and they endeavor to, as I like to call it, D of science. So develop, discover, and disseminate medication for very serious illnesses such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, and other regions within the scientific community. They have a predilection for biotechnology, but we also have to focus on Amgen, the Amgen Foundation, which is actually Scott's team. So while the organization has been present for roughly 40 years, the foundation has been present for 30 years, and they have been striving to allow accessibility to biology learning. So what is biology learning? Biology learning is a way to benefit society so that young professionals, students, high school students, and college students can gain accessibility to the sciences and actually develop their skills and then further on help society develop as a whole. Scott will be discussing with us the Amgen Lab Exchange, his experiences within academia and industry, as well as his educational background within the STEM community. We shall have a Q&A session at the end of this interview where you can ask all of your questions. I invite all of you, both on YouTube and in this call, to ask your questions now, and we will start at roughly eight minutes, at 8 o'clock and 10 minutes. So Scott, I would like to welcome you formally to the interview.
Thank you, Isla, really appreciate it, and I look forward to being here today.
It's really lovely to have you, and I think all of our viewers will have a very interesting time today because we will be talking about very broad and I guess multifaceted questions within the interview. So Scott, before we actually get within your time as the Vice President of Amgen and then within your work with the foundation, and even before that, your work within the University of Southern California and the University of California as well as your time within Japan, I wish to talk a bit about your time within your general studies. So for our viewers to actually understand where you're coming from within the STEM perspective, I wish to gain them the information about your educational background. So you have a BA in communication studies with a preference for education. You have an MA in education, and then you gained your title as a Doctor of Education, all within California. So will you talk with us about within your pathway towards that and how you decided that? How was that journey for you in general?
Sure. And again, thank you, not just to you, but also to the BH Futures Foundation for having this session today. I was always interested in education. If you go way back, my mother was a teacher and then eventually an assistant principal. I grew up here in Los Angeles. And so even when I started college and before that, I was finding a way to make a difference. And for me, that was around learning, mentoring, teaching. I was a counselor in many different camps actually growing up as well. But in college, as you said, ended up doing a minor in education, getting involved in a number of programs and initiatives to support underserved communities throughout Southern California, and then eventually went on for a master's degree and a doctorate in education. During that time, I had a number of different roles, as you mentioned, at local colleges and universities here, both UCLA and USC, which are the two very large institutions here in Los Angeles, and then also at a local community college, which for those of you that aren't familiar with the US higher education system, those are 2-year colleges where you can do your first 2 years of your undergraduate degree there, and then go on to the second 2 years to get a bachelor's degree. But again, that interest in education is what eventually, after a number of roles, led me to Amgen and the Amgen Foundation. But let me pause there.
That, I think that's, for me personally, that was very fascinating to find out, because I believe that your work, your philanthropic work with the foundation in general, was, I believe, like highly inspired through your work within the educational community. So how did you know straight away that you really wanted to go into your field, or was that kind of like going into college and then figuring it out as you go?
It was more of a figure it out as you go. After college, I think you mentioned, I moved to Japan for the year. I lived in a very small town through a program called JET, which is the Japan Educational Teaching Program. I might not have got that wrong, but essentially, I spent a year in a middle school teaching. It was a wonderful experience for me. More Americans should get a chance to go abroad and to have a chance to, I think in Europe, so many folks speak many languages and have a chance to go to other countries. That's not always the case here in America. So it was a wonderful experience for me. And then as I continued in my education, I think when I think of STEM education, my role at UCLA was with the CARE program, which was called the Center for Academic and Research Excellence. That entire program, that 4 years, was focused on getting kids excited about science. Maybe I shouldn't say kids. I should say young people, college students. It was focused on not just that, but really on addressing disparities that exist in the US in particular around many racial and ethnic groups that are not as predominant in the science. So our focus back at UCLA was figuring out how to make sure that some groups which are underrepresented in science, whether that's women, whether that's in the US, African Americans or Latinos, how can we run and create programs that would enable those students to get engaged? And that actually, Isla, you're an Amgen Scholar. We'll talk about that later. But the idea for Amgen Scholars back in 2005, when I started at the Amgen Foundation, really came from my experience at UCLA. And that, in that case, placing students into a research lab was what gave them, really opened their eyes to the excitement of a scientific career.
So that is like exactly the core of what I wanted to ask you about. So it's clear to me that your involvement with Amgen and before that has been like very, very multifaceted, and it has been progressing and evolving as you go. So when you completed your education, you mentioned that a lot of students have to have that practical involvement within their field. How did that look like for you when you completed your studies?
The idea of practical involvement, yeah. And so there I'm referring to essentially, when you think about the Amgen Foundation, and appreciate your overview of Amgen, I won't spend time, but as Isla mentioned, Amgen's a global biotechnology company. I should also note that I'm speaking today from Los Angeles, California. Amgen is headquartered here in Ventura County, which is right just west of Los Angeles. And the Amgen Foundation is our main philanthropic arm. So I'm the vice president of the Amgen Foundation. I've been with the Amgen Foundation for almost 16 years now. And I'm also with Amgen, the biotech company that again focuses on serious illness. At Amgen, as we think about the fact that we want to, I liked Isla's mention of the 3 Ds. At Amgen, we would say discover, develop, manufacture, and deliver innovative human therapeutics in cancer and cardiovascular disease and many other serious illnesses. But as we think about that mission, what the Amgen Foundation is focused on is how can we make sure to nurture the next generation of scientists? And not just that, not just creating pathways to get more students excited about science and engineering and technology and all of the careers that are needed to create and develop medicines, but also scientific literacy. How do we make sure that everyone understands and appreciates the role of science in our lives? So sorry, that was a long-winded way of getting back to Isla's question of, we recognize, I guess to put it as simply as possible, that if you are going to be interested in science and consider science as a career, the best way and the thing that we could do is give you a chance to do science, to engage in science. And that's what the Amgen Foundation goes about doing. We have other parts of the foundation. We do grants in our local communities. We encourage our staff to give their money and their time. We do disaster relief when there's a disaster around the world. But our main bread and butter, if you will, is that the staff members at Amgen that are going to make a difference a decade from now, 2 decades from now, they're in school right now, right? They're in kindergarten right now. And they could be in Bosnia, they could be in America, they could be anywhere. And so as we think about what we can do as a foundation in terms of our philanthropy, it's to give young people a chance to engage in science in an authentic manner. And in some cases that's hands-on. In other cases, we are, as we'll talk about, leveraging virtual platforms so that we can make sure to spread the net, even wider with respect to giving folks a chance to engage in science. Long-winded answer, but I think I got back to your question.
No. We are right on track. I really want to talk about what you mentioned about motivating and inspiring and gaining an incentive for young individuals that are currently, like you said, in preschool, even in kindergarten. You're not just, I really like the fact that Amgen is not just preparing for COVID-19. The company is actually preparing for COVID-20, COVID 30, 40, 50. They are looking, they have a very, not just the philanthropic point of view, but also a very long-term point of view. So most businesses or companies, they focus on the short term, getting results, getting statistics, getting data. And if it's not successful, then we just drop it. Well, Amgen takes a lot of risks, and it also benefits from those risks because they're looking to inspire the individuals that will be working in the future for that. So I would like for you to talk about that aspect of it, because I don't think a lot of people realize that about Amgen and both the foundation and the company in general.
Sure, and Amgen, if you go back 40 years, was one more small biotech company. I mean, I should say at that time, the biotechnology industry only came about because of some discoveries that won the Nobel Prize in the early 1970s, where you then had I think it was a Chiron, a Genentech, an Amgen, and a few companies. But these were venture capitalists and scientists, taking a risk to start something that today, again, as you noted, Ayla, we have 20 medicines, we have 24,000 staff members. The company has served millions of patients, and we're so proud to be part of this industry in what is often called the biocentury as we think about the 21st century. The long-term approaches, though, is critical. And whether you're talking about corporate America, where often we talk about the short-term focus on quarterly profits, or you're talking about the foundation, we do try to, I would sum it up in 4 words. We try to go big and we try to go long. And by that, and specifically speaking about philanthropy has the benefit of, we don't have a stock price, right? We're not held to, did we hit the quarterly numbers or the results? We're held to, are we making a difference based on the mission and the objectives set out by the foundation board? And that means we can take a long-term approach. We can take risks. We should be trying things. These are philanthropic dollars that have been donated by Amgen. The foundation then gives them away. And just for everyone's context, the Amgen Foundation has given nearly $400 million to date over our 30 years. And we give approximately $30 million a year. Most of that is in science education, but it's also in a number of other ways that we act philanthropically. And Amgen, I should note, it also does, there's an Amgen Safety Net Foundation, there's equipment donations, there's healthcare donations. There's a lot of other ways that Amgen as a company gives back as a corporate citizen. But I'm referring just to the Amgen Foundation and the grant making we do. And it's critical that you have a long-term approach because, as you said, and I've used that before as well, we're not concerned as much. I mean, we are concerned obviously about COVID-19, but we are preparing for COVID-39 or whatever number you want to throw out there. And I gotta say, I don't think there's ever been a time for the world where we recognize as a collective, humanity, if you will, the importance of science and the importance of all of the scientific fields. And and really appreciate and hopefully understand the role of science in our lives. That's where not only Amgen and the biotech industry plays, but that's where the Amgen Foundation plays. How can we help more people to understand and appreciate the role of science and just how important it is, whether it's vaccines for COVID-19 or addressing environmental issues like global warming, or I put it into two buckets. One side is scientific literacy, and that's critical. But the other side is we need people to go into these fields. We need people to, actually consider a career, right? So it's wonderful to reach someone and for them to understand the importance of basic research. If basic research hadn't happened and you didn't have, this mRNA platform and other things, you couldn't move as fast today. But on the other hand, we need future scientists, and we need to make sure that scientists are coming from every part of America, every part of the world. One of the charts that I hate to look at is when you look at where Nobel Prize winning scientists come from. On one hand, well, that's kind of cool. There's quite a few from America. On the other hand, that chart is horrible in some ways. There are whole parts of the world where there's Nobel Prize winning scientists that there have not been Nobel Prize winning scientists. Is that because there isn't talent there? Of course not. There is wonderful talent everywhere. It's because that the opportunity and the infrastructure to do research, to engage in science, is not everywhere. And that doesn't just hurt those students or young people or adults in those other countries and other even regions of the United States. It hurts all of us. It means there's medicines that aren't being made. It means there's solutions that aren't being advanced. And so that's part of the impetus as to why our programs at the Amgen Foundation are mostly global. It's because we care about making sure that there's a stronger pipeline for all of us. You are a wonderful example of that. So you're in Bosnia and you're spending the summer, or in a normal non-COVID year, you're a scholar in Switzerland at ETH Zurich. And that's the type of opportunity that we want to provide through the Amgen Foundation, in the hopes that you will get excited about science, you will meet a network of peers, and that you might consider going on into a scientific career.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, just like you said, I think it's very important to inspire young people to actually pursue a scientific career, because Scott, you mentioned that a lot of people have that interest and have that incentive to actually do something, but the resources are scarce depending on your point of view, or depending on your network, or depending on a plethora of other things. But Amgen, I personally perceive it to be very specifically centered on the aspect of ESG. So they really focus on that societal impact and societal point of frame. So they're not just like, how is this going to benefit the company? How is this going to benefit the foundation? Like, no, let's make an impact that will get young people involved in science, and then they can even gain this knowledge and then use it in society in general, so that everyone can benefit from it, because everyone can benefit from knowledge. And that's why I really want to go to my next point of how Amgen disseminates information and knowledge in the scientific community in general, how it's inspired by that. So you've had positions after you graduated, you have positions in junior high school in Japan, you had a position within the University of California, then the University of Southern California. So all of those aspects have been like a ladder and a stepping stone, so that you can gain information directly from students. How do you believe that part of your life impacted your point of view before you actually joined Amgen in 2005?
Well, so I think it's critical that you have that direct interaction with, if you're going to focus on learning and teaching and strengthening science education, you better have had a chance to engage with students directly, with teachers directly. I think that wonderful part of being part of the Amgen Foundation for me is suddenly, instead of engaging one-on-one with a student or with a handful of teachers, I'm able to use and work with the Amgen Foundation board to leverage the Amgen Foundation resources to reach thousands, to reach millions of students and teachers and others. And so that's a position that, you know, I miss in some ways the direct contact, but had I not had that direct contact for years through nonprofits and through my professional roles, I wouldn't be as informed. You know, the other thing is philanthropy is sometimes criticized when they are trying to make a difference with a population that they are not listening to. They are not, imagine you wanted to make a difference. I'm making this up, you know, in homelessness, but you never spoke to the population of homeless in a particular region, or to nonprofits that work with them, or government actors or others. So philanthropy done wrong is when you're trying to focus on a population and you don't know much about that population, you have no connection with that population. At the Amgen Foundation, what we strive to do is we want to make a difference with students and with teachers and with the public in many ways, to strengthen scientific literacy, to strengthen science education. And so we spend a lot of time interacting with teachers, with students, with many nonprofits that work closely with those groups, so that we can listen to those that we're trying to serve, and thus do, you know, philanthropy as we see fit, and in as responsible a manner as possible. I do want to go back to one thing you mentioned. You mentioned ESG, and that we really focus on the S. We do really focus on the O. And for everyone, ESG, there's a lot of jargon out there with regard to the CSR. And so the field that I'm in at a higher level, you could call corporate social responsibility. That's CSR. Isla alluded to ESG, which is environment, social, and governance. She said we focus on social a lot, and the Amgen Foundation absolutely does focus on social a lot and what we can do to make a difference in society. Having said that, I have colleagues across Amgen that are also very focused on the environment, the E, and we're also very focused as a company on governance and how decisions are made for the company across a wide variety of areas. I would point out for anyone that's interested, on Amgen.com, if you go under responsibility, we put out an ESG report for the company that also includes and talks about the Amgen Foundation just about 2 months ago. And so something to check out if you have a chance. Sorry, I wanted to just touch on
totally
the
fine.
E and the G too.
That's totally fine. Whenever you want to interject, you just do that. Yes, definitely. I noticed that straight away when I got my first hint of what Amgen was and how it actually works and how its trajectory has gone up since the beginnings of the foundation, the beginnings of the company. So you alluded to the fact that you started roughly in 2005. So that's been a long journey for both the progress of the foundation and your general personal progress within the foundation. So I wish for you to speak a bit on the fact of how you've basically been the architect of the foundation in many ways by creating a environment where there's a lot of emphasis placed on the fact that learning should be made available. And we talked about the democratized knowledge and democratized science so that everyone can get access to it. So how have you approached that since your first time entering the company in general?
Sure, and I'm here speaking, but I want to make a mention of my colleagues that I'm proud to have been with the foundation, but I'm also proud to have served under Jean Lim Terra, who was the president of the foundation for many years, and now Eduardo Setlin and many other colleagues at the Amgen Foundation. I think, have been the architects behind the approach to democratizing access to science education. I also would call it, for a quick second, just in terms of understanding the foundation, we have an Amgen Foundation board that is made up of 8 senior executives of the company. So when you talk about the vision and the strategy for the Amgen Foundation, our chair, Judy Brown, all of our board members, even when you talk about, the CEO of the company, Amgen, this focus on democratizing access to science, democratizing access to high quality science education is something that is not just coming from me, it is coming from all of us. It's coming from what you brought up originally about the long-term focus, the recognition that in philanthropy, we can take that long-term view. I'm proud to say, you're an Amgen Scholar this summer. You are joining 4,250 Amgen Scholars because that program started back in 2006 when we launched it. So when you talk about going long-term, we've been doing this for 16 years, sending students to top universities across the world to undertake a research experience. We've committed over $70 million to that program alone. But the high school biotech program that we can talk about more that brings biotechnology into schools, and then obviously Khan Academy and Lab Exchange, all of these programs, as well as many others, are about democratizing access. It all goes back to what we talked about, initially, where whether you look at the map of Nobel Prize winners or you're looking at other proxies for how we engage in science, the map is off. It's almost like we have a basketball team, but only certain people get to play. That's not good. That's not good for the world. It's not good for too many young people. I'm blanking on the right word, but for Amgen Scholars, our maybe slogan's the right word. Our slogan for many years has been discover your potential. And in many ways, that could be a slogan for the Amgen Foundation. Today, we use everyone needs science and science needs everyone. And that's another way of saying the same thing, Isla, which is everyone should have a chance to engage in science, to consider whatever career they're interested in, because ultimately, we can't have a basketball team that can only pull certain players to play. We all need to be on the playing field. And that is going to benefit science and humanity in untold ways. And when we get to Lab Exchange, that's what that's about. It's about making sure that more folks get a chance to engage in science, to prepare for science. And that's my puppy.
The beauty of online.
Yeah, the beauty of online. She probably sees a cat outside, so you're all hearing her respond to a cat in Los Angeles. Anyways, that's what it's about, though. We want everyone to have a chance to engage, and that's not the case today. In the U.S., that's not the case. In Bosnia, I'm sure that's not the case, and throughout the world, that's not the case. And until that changes, there is so much talent on the sidelines that it is a place that I'm proud that we do a lot in STEM education, but I'm actually proud that so many governments and the BH Futures Foundation and so many other people share this passion, because we need collective action. We need many folks to come together to make it possible for more people to engage in STEM fields.
Absolutely, I definitely really like the analogy that you made towards the basketball team and how STEM education has been impacted by that lack of diversity, not just in specific groups of people, but in general, specific countries or specific regions have been impacted by that. But something about Amgen that a lot of people should know about is the fact that I mentioned this at the beginning, but it's present in roughly 100 countries. So its impact is very vast, and they do try, and they're constantly endeavoring to create, discover, and see new ways of impacting the society in a very positive manner. And the fact that I, of course, am impacted as a Amgen Scholar within the foundation has benefited not just me, but it will benefit for everyone further down the line as more and more scholars join not just Amgen, but discover themselves in their specific scientific field. So Scott, you also mentioned, I really like the fact that you mentioned that Amgen has that very specific approach, not for society's benefit as well, but also the environment, and in general have that very, very interesting way of dealing with a matter. So I'm aware of this due to being an Amgen Scholar, but I would like for you to talk a bit more about how the company and the foundation have reached out to impact society through scholars.
Yeah, and I guess what I would first say is that the role of companies has changed, I think, over many years. If you go back decades, you had this idea that companies are there to serve shareholders. That's it. And companies should not do, there's a famous economist called Milton Friedman that said companies should not give a single dollar to philanthropy because that money is the shareholders' money, and give it to them, let them give. And I'd say that's really evolved over many, many years to where today ESG, which we spoke about, has become much, much bigger. I mean, at the moment, it is, literally there are articles being written about it in every paper across the world, as companies recognize the many stakeholders that they need and should serve. And that is their shareholders, absolutely, but that's also their communities, the communities they operate in, their employees, and the way they treat and handle employees, including development. There's that wider view that I think many CEOs, and again, the Amgen Foundation is just one part of how Amgen's making a difference. Our focus obviously is serving patients as a company. And then as you go into the many other ways that we give back and we act as a good corporate citizen, ESG is a major focus for Amgen today, but it's also a major focus for many of the biggest companies in the world, wherever they are. And that's something that I think is a good thing. It's important. Corporations have power to make a difference, or to do the opposite, to make things worse. And so I think Amgen takes seriously its commitment to the environment, to its employees, to the communities we serve. And again, coming back to science, we recognize that Amgen exists because of science. I mean, what does biotech do at the end of the day? We leverage what we know in science and engineering and technology and other fields to create medicines to serve patients, to help patients fight serious illness. One of the, bringing this to science education for a second, one of the scientists that was on a panel, this is a couple of years ago, and was asked, well, why did you go into science? What was it for you? And she said, back in 10th grade, this was actually in Europe, in England, she asked her biology teacher a question. And the biology teacher said, I don't know. She said, what do you mean I don't know? And he said, no, it's not that I don't know. We don't know that. In other words, society doesn't know the answer to that question. And she was, I think, 15 at the time. And up until that moment, she thought we knew everything. Like what do you mean? They had this big book and all this knowledge. And it was at that moment that she realized how much out there we don't know. And for her, she's been a scientist the last 40 years now. But that was the trigger for her. And so I would emphasize on that note that does Amgen and the biotech industry and the biopharmaceutical industry use science and biology and to address problems? We do. But there is so much we don't know. What that teacher said to her back in 1980 or whatever year that was is still applicable today when you think about the brain or you think about the deep sea space. And there is so much we still don't know, and that is why we need more people to have a chance to engage in science and to learn science. And one of the things that I think is most important about our partnership with Khan Academy and our partnership with Lab Exchange and Harvard University is that those platforms are really high quality. You can engage in science. You can do a lot on there that we can get into if you want to go there, but they're free. I mean, they are free. You need an internet connection, you need a phone, or you need a computer to get there. But today, if you are in Bosnia and you want to do a simulation of gel electrophoresis, or you want to watch a video, about genetics, they are free. And that is, I think, critical if we are to give more young people, and old people for that matter, a chance to experience science. We need to remove the barriers. You can't have wonderful stuff that's behind a firewall or that costs too much for someone to afford it. And so the fact that it's free is fundamental to our philosophy of making sure that everyone has a chance to engage.
It's a very interesting fact that we're definitely going to get into as we move on throughout the interview. But I really love the fact that, and I have gotten comments from everyone when the moment I talked about this interview. So a lot of young students and young professionals really like the approach that Amgen takes in the sense how they operate within the industry and academia. So it's a very interesting way of looking at it, of not just getting the biology learning and STEM education as a free option, but also getting it in a very accessible manner. It's not difficult. It's not, you don't have to jump through any hoops to get there. Just like you said, you need an internet connection, and then you need to just log in, and then you have this beautiful online community. But I would like to emphasize the fact that this entire discussion is in the industry versus academia. And I would like for you to talk a bit about how Amgen, in my opinion, beautifully handles the aspect of respecting teachers, but also employees by Amgen. So you wouldn't be expecting anyone in Amgen to actually be able to run online classes or any classroom, and you wouldn't be expecting a teacher to move and discover and disseminate information regarding medication. So it's a very beautiful balance that is always, I would guess, omnipresent within the foundation and their organization.
Yeah, I think that it comes down to partnership, right? We can't, no entity can do this alone. This today is a great example, right? So the Amgen Foundation and the BH Futures Foundation are partnering to put on a session that may or may not be of interest to folks, but for those that are interested, we have a biotech company that's headquartered in Southern California, and a foundation headquartered, I assume it's headquartered in Bosnia Herzegovina, that is thinking about how to make the future possible and how to help students prepare for careers in the biopharma or biotech industry, and obviously other industries. And so when you look at the program you're a part of, Ayla, there, what have we done? So the Amgen Foundation, the philanthropic arm of a company, has made a grant where we send students to go spend the summer at a top university. So if you're in Europe, you can go spend the summer at Karolinska or Cambridge or Munich or Pasteur or ETH. In Asia, it's other universities. In the US, it's Harvard or Stanford or Caltech. We open up the doors to those universities so that students can spend the summer there. What do you learn during the summer there? You get a chance to do research in a hands-on manner. You get to be part of a lab. But during the summer, we also have a symposium. And that symposium brings all the students from Europe together or the US together. This year with COVID, we're just doing a global symposium as it's virtual to bring everyone together. But what are you going to learn about at that symposium? You're going to hear from folks in academia, but you're also going to hear from folks in industry about the impact of biotechnology on the drug discovery and development process, about, again, different symposia has different topics, but drug manufacturing, that's a great example. Manufacturing biologic medicines is not something you find as often in academia, right? At least not at the scale that a company like Amgen, will have to use. And the analogy one of my our former executives used was, listen, when you have to make cookies for the class, you can do that in your oven. But when you have to make a biologic medicine for the country of Bosnia or for Western Europe or Russia, wherever, you can't do that in your kitchen, right? The equipment, everything changes in terms of the scale. And of course, industry has ways to move up that scale. But and what you'll hear from me is that from an Amgen Foundation perspective, we're agnostic of whether you go on to industry or academia or government, or maybe you just go on and you decide to do something different completely, but you're a more informed and educated citizen that is literate when it comes to science. So that when a COVID vaccine comes along, you can talk to someone that may be more vaccine hesitant and say, well, do you know what a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial is? And if people understand what that is, they may be more likely to consider taking the vaccine than if they don't understand what that is. And so, all of that, from our perspective, there are differences between industry and academia and others, and scientists will talk about that. They'll say, well, in academia, you have more control over what you work on, right? And in industry, maybe you're part of a team and you don't necessarily get to set the agenda. But then others will say, but in academia, you have to fundraise, right? So you have to find funds for that. In industry, you don't. And then others talk about work-life balance and say, well, boy, in industry, I was able to leave. But today, I think it's less of a black box industry in the past was. You have folks go from industry to academia. You have folks go back and forth. And at the Amgen Foundation level, thinking about the long term, we want people to have a chance to engage in science and to consider a scientific career, regardless of where someone ultimately lands. And so many of our programs straddle academia and industry and try to bring them together. And Lab Exchange is a wonderful example of that, where some of the techniques you can do on Lab Exchange and the simulations and interactives, it doesn't matter whether you're planning to go to academia or industry or you're in government, it's still helpful to understand and be able to engage in some of those techniques regardless of the path you seek.
I would like to touch upon two facts that you just mentioned, because I believe a lot of our audience members will be able to comprehend the importance of Amgen and how the company actually operates, as well as the foundation. So you touched upon the fact that Amgen in general focuses on educating society. So like you said, it's not just students, it's not just the practical approach, but it's also.
And I would change that for a quick second. I would say Amgen in general, as a company, we focus on discovering and developing, manufacturing medicines to serve patients across the world. The Amgen Foundation, the philanthropic arm that I'm a part of, is really focused on what you said with regard to educating and informing and inspiring the next generation.
Definitely. I think Amgen, like the company, will actually be there at the frontier of biology and be able to educate in that manner. So it's not just based like what the foundation does is biology learning. That is the essence, and that is the core of the foundation. But the organization inadvertently will teach society in general how these things. So it's like you said, it's interconnected. So it's mostly based on the fact of how the end result will impact society. So
absolutely, and every dollar, I should note, a corporate foundation, every single dollar we have is donated by Amgen. So when I say that the Amgen Foundation has given away nearly $400 million, that is $400 million that came from Amgen, was donated to the foundation, and then we distribute that funds to nonprofits across the world. Absolutely.
So like you said, the impetus for the company's work goes directly to the foundation in many ways. And in the case of allowing people to have that information ready at their fingertips. So it's not just allowing students to learn, it's allowing young professionals, the common person, like your everyday Joe, so that people can understand how and why, for example, vaccines are important. So it's like you said, I really like the fact that you pointed out how trials are set up, and a lot of people, if they're not directly tied to the STEM community, they would not know. And I know a lot of people are just baffled by the fact that okay, now we have vaccines. Like, how did that? It just came to be. Well, it didn't. It took a lot of trial and error. It took many companies, many organizations, many new ways. Essentially, we're living through a chapter of history right now within online learning. And Amgen, the foundation, of course, has been more active than ever within the online community right now, because we're all online right now. So can you speak about the fact of how that transition has been for the foundation?
Sure, and I would go back to something you just said about many organizations, many companies. Like science, as we know, builds, right? It's not just companies that this vaccine just, it was only possible because of the basic research and the discoveries and the science that happened over decades, right? And those allowed for eventually, in this case, select companies to leverage the latest and greatest to apply that. When you talk about industry and academia, often it's that application to a real world problem in the case of a company where they're taking that last step, right? They're trying to scale something to bring it to patients that, clinical trials and things of that nature are not something that you will undertake as a professor in academia. But there are other things that professors in academia will undertake that are not necessarily going to happen, in industry. And so it really is this collective enterprise that is necessary for science to advance. And that's been the case going back to, for obviously hundreds of years. And Isla, forgive me, I want to, since I did that side point, can you mention the specific question you just asked so I cover it correctly?
No, it's totally fine. This, like you said, this is an open and very liberated discussion. So my initial point was of how, I know Amgen and in general, the foundation works online and has that very eminent online presence, but how has it been, how has it been able to adapt to the new normalcy that we have right now?
Sure. And maybe I'll share my screen. We talked about that. Oh, see, I'm on your website. I had opened up a handful. First off, for anyone on the call, we have this website. It's, I don't know if you can see it at the top, but it's amgeninspires.com. So if you're interested in learning about the Amgen Foundation, obviously to learn about Amgen, amgen.com has everything you'd want to know. You can go to amgen.com and go under responsibility and learn about the company, as well as what we do in environment, social, and governance. But the Amgen Foundation, any of the programs I mentioned are here under amgeninspires.com. And since your question was focused on the online space, let me go here and jump. We have two platforms in the online space, Isla. One is Khan Academy. Khan Academy is free for anyone, everywhere. It's a wonderful platform. It started, for those of you that might know the story, about 16 years ago, Saul Khan, his niece at a wedding, his aunt came up to him and said, "My niece does not understand algebra." And he said, "Oh, well, I can try to help her." And so this site called YouTube was just starting, and he created videos for his niece. And soon his niece was sharing those videos with his nephews, and soon it expanded, and soon those hits on that videos went up and up and up. And obviously, the rest is history. This platform today has over 100 million users across the world. And you can see here under courses, they have math and government and a number of different subjects. The Amgen Foundation, many years ago, I reached out to the Khan Academy and I said, "You do not have science." You can see today that's not the case. They do have science. But we were the funder of all of this in biology. And much of it's at the high school level. And there are videos and exercises and assessments, all funded by the Amgen Foundation here in biology, that are wonderful. And Khan Academy is a smart platform. And what I mean by that is if Isla and myself went onto that platform and started learning something and did a mission in geometry, it would recognize that Isla is brilliant and I'm not, and it would adjust the questions that we were seeing based on our, based on our level. And so I think Khan Academy is definitely something to check out. Khan Academy is also available in several languages. Forgive me, I do not know if it's available in, I would admit, Croatian or other language, that might be spoken in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But it's available in other languages as well in different subjects. What we recognize, well, Khan Academy is a wonderful platform doing great things. We wanted to make sure that students can engage in the scientific process. And the videos and what's on here is wonderful, but about, oh, I didn't click that right. About 6 years ago, we started a conversation with a professor at Harvard University, Robert Liu, a wonderful professor. And unfortunately, we lost Rob to cancer late last year. He is the reason Lab Exchange exists. He was an expert when it came to scientific research and biology. He was an expert when it came to technology, but he was also an expert when it came to teaching and learning. And so Rob, as the founding director, and then Garv and the huge team that makes Lab Exchange possible, we really have here a platform for learning and teaching science to the world. And this has taken off. We are the funder, but you can see here, we're partnering with UNESCO to get the platform out there. And you can see that the content on this website is coming from all of these different partners. We're up to over 100 different partners now that are putting their content for those that care about learning and teaching and sharing science on this platform. And so I can click on any of these. I'll click on Khan Academy, since I just talked about that. And you can see here that the Khan Academy page, and the fact that you see 258. So there's 258 videos, all of that biology content that's here on Lab Exchange. And Lab Exchange, we started with about a year and a half ago with a few thousand users. I'm proud to say last week we hit 10 million users. We have more users in Africa today than America, actually. But because of COVID the last year, there has been a lot of interest in how can we continue to engage students in science at this time. And under subject area, you're going to see a lot in biology. I can click on that and you'll see a lot of different subjects, but physics and chemistry, preparing for careers, preparing for college. There's a lot on here. And I can go in, and I'm happy to show some of the simulations and the way Lab Exchange is organized. But Lab Exchange, what we're trying to do, going back to Isla's point about virtual and how we're thinking about this, is how can we make it possible for anyone, for a 16-year-old that right now is in Bosnia that wants to do gel electrophoresis. Well, she might not have access to the equipment right now, but she could go, if you take this link right here at the top and copy and paste it. And again, you don't even have to log in. Logging in will give you more functionality, but you don't have to log in. And you can do a simulation here that, again, these simulations cost a lot of money. They take months to build. They're actually built at Harvard and are an ed tech company in South Africa. But here you can read about gel electrophoresis. Sorry, I'm trying to move our photos, which I know no one else can see except me. You can then check out the materials if you were in a lab and able to do gel electrophoresis. You can make a prediction, what a scientist would do before they do a scientific technique. And then there's a protocol. Here's the protocol. And when you're in the protocol, you can grab the pipette and open the box and change the temperature on the power supply. You can just play, which how often in science can we just play? You can't, right? The teacher only has so many minutes. This is equipment, there's safety risks. Here you can follow the instructions or not. And afterwards, you're going to get results based on what you did, right? What did you predict? What did you actually get? And by the way, here is what ideally you would have seen had you followed the protocol. There's a chance to reflect, there's questions in here, and then there's some takeaways. Okay, what did you learn about gel electrophoresis? And so that's just one example of the type of simulation that you'll find on Lab Exchange. I'll show one other thing and pause for a second. Actually, let me do two things real quickly. One is narratives. So it's great to understand the scientific techniques. What if you've never seen someone that looks like you? How are you going to identify as a scientist? So these are all stories of different folks from different backgrounds talking about how they became a scientist, how they went into science. And we have many of these, but I don't know how many scientists we have from Bosnia and Herzegovina on here. I want to have more STEM professionals from everywhere. And so these are stories. Another aspect of the platform that are pretty cool are what are called interactives. So I'll click on one. These are just animations that allow you to control the speed. So to learn something, all I do is I control the button and I just use the mouse and I go through. I'm just going to go fast here, but I'm just going to learn about CRISPR-Cas9 in this case. And I can go forward, I can go back, but the team at Lab Exchange is just continuing to think about what are ways that we can create simulations and a variety of other content types that help people to engage in science. And there's, the last thing I'll show quickly is there are clusters here. This is the high school biotech program that the Amgen Foundation runs. And then without going into detail, this is what's called a pathway. So I just showed you all a simulation of gel electrophoresis, right? But before you do that, if you're a student in high school in Bosnia, shouldn't you know what it is before you do it? So here, it's an article. What is gel electrophoresis? Here's what's the equipment you're going to use. Here's a simulation. Here's a video. Here's an interactive and some questions, and then an interactive. And then here's the objectives. What Lab Exchange allows you to do is today, if Isla looked at this and she said, I want to teach my class, or I want to teach my brother or sister gel electrophoresis, you can customize this. So I can make a copy of this pathway, and then I can go in and I can insert in whatever language I want, my own content. I can take content from anywhere else on the platform, and I can mix and match and remix what's on here, just like you would do to a Spotify playlist. I can do that so that it makes sense for my friend in Bosnia or my classroom in Bosnia. And so it's that ability to customize, which is why we see this platform diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging. It's at the heart of it because it lets you take what's here and it lets you put it into a way that's going to speak to those that you're trying to reach. So I think I went into too much detail here, but on the virtual front, as you can tell, we're very excited about the partnership we've had with Khan Academy, as well as the partnership we've had with Harvard around Lab Exchange. Both platforms are free, and I'd urge you to check it out and think of it as a tool that you can leverage to strengthen STEM education wherever you are and with whoever you're trying to reach.
That was lovely. I think all of our viewers are gonna really talk about that because I really like the fact that you use gel electrophoresis for an example for this, because at my university as a genetics and bioengineering student, we constantly do that. But like you said, it's important to know what it is. It's not just going into a lab and then just wasting equipment. You can't just do that. You can't waste supplies. But what Amgen the foundation was actually able to do was provide this incredible online community that allows students to create, share, experiment in essence with anything, whether that be very specifically in genetics or biology as a whole. So I really enjoy the fact that Khan Academy and Lab Exchange is very prominent, but also I don't think a lot of people from Bosnia are aware of Lab Exchange. I know most students here use Khan Academy. Khan Academy is, we often joke about the fact that none of us could actually finish university without having that accessibility, because books and teachers and professors are one thing, but having that way to practice actually benefits the students in many ways. So by creating this, and also another fact that I would like to point out to our audience is the fact that it launched on International Day of Education. So it's very accessible. It's very important, and I think it was organized by Harvard. So that gives you a sense of how fast-paced it actually is and can become if you use it, if you have that accessibility. So Scott, you mentioned also the fact. Yes, go on. No.
I was just gonna say, you've seen Lab Exchange today, but just know there is a lot under development. So, if you go on there and you see, I'm interested in biochemical engineering and I'm not seeing things, please reach out to Harvard. There's a way to collaborate. Maybe there's a way for the BH Futures Foundation or other organizations in Bosnia that want to collaborate in some way. We know that the platform only makes a difference if it meets your needs. So the whole platform, the whole philosophy behind the platform is to break things into little pieces. Legos is sometimes the analogy we use, right? Videos and simulations and more partnerships, but then to allow you, the educator or the scientist or the parent or the learner, to reassemble those Legos into whatever way you want, and to even put in your own content. So I think I agree with you. Khan Academy is wonderful. I think Lab Exchange is wonderful too, but it's newer. Many people have never heard of it. It's only been in existence for about 18 months, but I'd urge you to check out both platforms if of interest.
Yeah, definitely. It has that essence. When I first learned about Lab Exchange, it was very, I guess for me, it was very emblematic of what Amgen as a foundation does and how they are able to provide knowledge in a very, it's what we said. It's not jumping through hoops to get to the information or get that practice in or inform yourself as a learner, like you said, Scott. So Lab Exchange, I think, is something that everyone has to check out if they're interested in anything really, because it has that ability to provide vast amounts of knowledge on various fields. So most people who have benefited from Khan Academy and have that accessibility towards Khan Academy are going to love Lab Exchange for that very reason. And also, Scott, you mentioned the fact that it's a very new platform, so it's not known for those reasons, but it's also very interesting that the fact it's so new and it happened kind of like simultaneously with COVID. So that virtual aspect has been incredibly done by Amgen so that they can transition in a way that everything is available. But like you said, Scott, feedback is also very, very important so that it can develop and change and suit the needs of anyone that uses it.
And that was somewhat of a coincidence. We obviously, I mentioned this conversation started like literally back in 2015, 2016, took years of development to get it to where it is. It only launched a couple months, at least before COVID hit the United States. And then our high school biotech program, maybe I'll share my screen for one more moment. The biotechnology program that we run at the high school level, and again, these are tours that show you the different labs and which pathways to go to. But because that program is around the world, you'll notice you can change the language here. So we recognize that some of our regions they also were out of school. And so if I click on Turkish, for instance, some of this and the simulations we have here, they're not available in English for many folks in the United States. But I can imagine that simulation I just showed you here in Turkish and Spanish and French and some of the other languages. Our guess is that even though we've done our best, that most educators in Turkey or elsewhere are not aware of the assets that are on this platform. And so, over time, we're hoping to be able to go and ensure from a diversity standpoint that more and more languages are available for some of the content. Now, I want to be clear, all of the content is not available in every language, but what we did for the biotechnology content is do some translation so that those teachers in other regions were able to, in French, leverage the labs that they would have been doing in person.
It's very interesting for the fact that you mentioned that these platforms allow for different languages to be set up, and also in that way it can reach many regions, because we might assume that a lot of the population knows English, but then again, when you look at your group that you're trying to reach, maybe the older generation would not be as suited for that specific platform in general. And the transition that Amgen was able to make within this online presence and online platform has been, I believe it's been incredible in many ways. But also from my point of view, I can see that a lot of students, a lot of university students, college students have been able to benefit from this aspect. But we also alluded to the fact that the Amgen Scholars program is something that the foundation has set up for a while now and has benefited a plethora of students for that accessibility. So for those that are not aware, Amgen has made the program in a way that it allows students to go to a specific top-ranking university, depending on what country or continent you are, and you're able to reach that for that specific point of view. So my experience with Amgen was first set up through this program. So I was accepted, as Scott said, into the ETH Zurich program, and my background in biology allowed me to gain accessibility to this university, and it also allows anyone who has that specific skill sets, that specific profile that Amgen is looking for in order to assure that people are able to, the students are able to go and gain that internship experience that they require. So can you talk a bit more about the fact that, because I know in my specific field, it's absolutely necessary to have that experience in the lab and work through the labs, and especially work in a lab team. So you have a professor, you have a mentor, but you're also gaining experience through a very diverse group of your peers that are all there for the same reason, but you have to work as a collective in order to essentially broaden your research perspective.
And going back to the beginning, we talked about, students need the opportunity to do science. We are so proud of Lab Exchange and Khan Academy and the other programs. We're able to reach millions. On the other hand, that's not meant to replace the in-person experiences. Here, what we've said to these universities is we want you to open your doors for students from every college and university, particularly from colleges and universities or countries or states for that matter that don't have the type of research infrastructure that you'll find at some of these universities. I would mention, by the way, for a student in Bosnia, not only can you apply to the Europe program, which you'll see at 5 universities here in Europe, but the Asia program is open globally. So Tsinghua and Tokyo and National University of Singapore, the Kyoto University is here. All of those, that program is open globally. So if you're an undergraduate, there's eligibility, but essentially you haven't graduated from undergrad, you're past your freshman year, you could apply either to the Europe program or to the Asia program. And again, this program has been going on for many years. And essentially, we're trying to create the type of experience with your peers where you can really get part of a lab and undertake an undergraduate research experience. The one other program I would mention that I haven't spoken about it as much is the Amgen Biotech experience. So this is a high school biotech program where we train teachers and provide all the equipment, and then they are able to isolate DNA and clone a gene, express and purify a protein right in their own classroom. This program is also across the world. You can see some of the dots. Unfortunately, I don't have a dot to show you in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but you can see that we have partners across the world where we are, in some cases, partnering with universities, in other cases, nonprofits. You can see right here, this is a nonprofit in Turkey. But here in this one's in Pittsburgh. Actually, what's interesting about Citizen Science Lab is Amgen's not in Pittsburgh, but another foundation came to us and said, "Hey, listen, you've been doing this for 30 years. It clearly works. If we pay for it, will you come to Pittsburgh?" And we said, "Absolutely." So they were so proud to now be in Pittsburgh through another foundation. But it shows you here in Italy. Is the association we partner with to bring essentially what is a biotechnology program into high schools. And this talks about that. But again, any of the programs, these 4 big programs I showed, if you go to amgeninspires.com, you can learn more about them.
It's truly
and I see, just so you know, I see there's questions under Q&A and under chat. I don't know if I should click on those, or you let me know.
I will. My phone is blowing up. The Q&A session is blowing up, so we have a lot of questions. So we'll get to them right now. We can do both in the chat and the Q&A, but let's start from the Q&As first. So, like you said, all of your programs within the foundation are absolutely something. The fact that it's so interesting comes from the notion that they're so different, but they all have the same goals. So it all ties back into creating an environment where knowledge, and more specifically STEM education, is very present, but also very available. So I think a lot of
they are, to your point, they all are connected. So on Lab Exchange, all of the biology content we funded on Khan Academy is on Lab Exchange. on Lab Exchange. The Amgen Biotech Experience virtual labs are there. And there's actually now, it's not public yet, but we're building Amgen Scholars assets so that a student, before they become an Amgen Scholar, can also practice and learn about lab etiquette and techniques. And of course, even if you're not an Amgen Scholar, but you're about to go into a research experience, that will be public for everybody. So they all are connected.
They're 100% all entwined in a very unique way, because they all have that. So, like, the general concept of it is tied together, but like you said, they're also physically tied together in a sense that they can work without each other in many ways, because they're all kind of connected. And like you said, first we have to have that theoretical part out of the way in order for students or learners, like Scott, you said, to have that accessibility and have that practice in a very virtual sense. And it's not that foreign in our current climate as well. So let's start with the questions so that we don't blow up the chat in a sense. We have a question by Dada. Dada asks, Mr. Scott, if that's all right for the Mr., if we're interested in signing up for this program, what are the main tasks that we have to do, and how does the program work for beginners? I have many interests, but my hobby is reading and analyzing effects of algae and food additives.
And so I'm not positive which program she's referring to, but what I would say is Khan Academy and Lab Exchange are literally free, and you can just go to, again, you can go to amgeninspires.com and then go to Khan Academy, leverage the platform as you see fit. You can create an account or not. Lab Exchange, same thing. You can create an account or not. But for instance, if you want to sign up with a mentor, or you want to customize a pathway, or there's a number of things you could do that I would encourage you to sign up. It's a free account. You just sign up, and you can. So there's no application or anything for those two virtual free platforms. Amgen Scholars is different, Isla, as you know. Every November, and hopefully with COVID going away slowly and over time, we can have a normal Amgen Scholars program. And with that program, every November 1st, all of the applications go up. So you can go to amgenscholars.com, and usually for a 3-month period, you can apply to be an Amgen Scholar at a college or university. Unfortunately, we're so proud to have 360 Amgen Scholars, but the program does get a lot of applications. But I would note that the universities are in particular looking for students from colleges and universities or countries that may not have the same research infrastructure that you see in more affluent places, or the same type of labs that you'll find at Harvard University or Cambridge University. And then Amgen Biotech Experience, the last program I saw, I don't know if your colleague is a teacher. That program today, the in-person program is only available in select countries in Europe and elsewhere. But the virtual program is available on Lab Exchange. So there's no application there. But the in-person program, unfortunately, today is not available in Bosnia.
Like you said, it's very, Lab Exchange has that advantage of being free and being readily available at all times. But also a fact that I would like to point out to all of our viewers, those interested in Amgen Scholars and that program in general, becoming a scholar, have to be aware of those deadlines that creep up at the end of the year in November, and in essence have to have that point of view of being a specific type of profile for a student. So all of their knowledge is essentially going to get encapsulated within a laboratory. So like you said, as COVID is slowly but surely getting mitigated, it's important for students to have that accessibility with Lab Exchange and Khan Academy, to have that either virtually, online, so that they can specifically practice for that next stage of their life.
And I would add just quickly, we're one funder that has 4 major programs. There are many funders out there. There are many programs run by governments, and just encourage you, please check out what we've done. I'm so proud of those, but by all means, look at other initiatives that may be out there to take advantage of.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I hope that answers your question. And we have another question from Amina. Amina greets you from rainy Sarajevo, because it's finally raining. She asks, my question for Mrs. Scott is, what led you to pursue philanthropy?
Well, so I never intended to be in philanthropy. After my route in education, when I was looking for my next step after moving personally from one city to another, the commute in Los Angeles, as you may be aware, the traffic here, I needed to find a new role. And as I applied to new roles, Amgen was looking for someone, for their foundation to focus on education. And that was my route into being in philanthropy. And it's been fascinating to work with the foundation board and to think about what are the types of initiatives that we should focus on. One thing that might be clear from when I'm talking is we decided long ago, rather than doing many things pretty good, let's just do a few things very, very well. And so I think that's a good, principle, whether it's for your career or for your organization or for the idea of focusing and doing things, very well in a few areas versus trying to do everything. A professor that used to give a talk at one of our Amgen Scholars symposiums said, listen, imagine on this axis is the number of boyfriends or girlfriends you have, and on this axis is how happy they are. And what does that line look like, right? And it's, well, boy, with one boyfriend or girlfriend, happiness. And as you have more boyfriends or girlfriends, and it goes out like that. And his point was that, when he was talking to students, you might be interested in many things. That's great. But focusing, and it can make a difference. And we do the same thing with the Amgen Foundation. We try to do a few things very well. And it's been great to be a part of philanthropy, but it's important that philanthropy, again, as I mentioned earlier, listens and stays very connected to what we're trying to make a difference in, and is not this sort of ivory tower that's not connected to society. So we try to practice what we preach there.
It's a very good point that you made about just like focusing on specific things, because I know going into university, a lot of students are more, I guess, lenient towards specific things because they are still figuring things out. But like you said, Scott, it's very important to find at least one specialism that you really want and then focus on that. And Amgen is a great reflection of how that looks when a huge corporation and an organization and the foundation actually utilizes that in day-to-day life. So I hope that answers your question, Amina. We have.
I would just say too that focus can make sense. Having said that, the hot field today is not necessarily the hot field 10 years from now, right? So the other important thing from a career perspective is to stay adaptable, to always be learning, to always be flexible as you think about what you want to do. People today that work in data science, did not think about data science 30, 25 years ago, right? They might have, but so it's one of those things where it helps to try to be the best in the focus in what you do, but also to remain adaptable and always willing to learn.
That is a great piece of advice for everyone here, because I mean, especially now in our current climate, we discussed talking about a point of before COVID times. So now we can see how that looks like on a global level, to be able to adapt to certain scenarios and then learn from those scenarios so that you can adapt as either a professional, a student, or whatever your point of interest is currently. So we have a question for an anonymous attendee. So they ask, do you see any advantages for students to remain in academia and research rather than branching into industry?
I think that question comes back to what your objectives are. What do you, I hate to say this as it gets said too often, but I'll say it anyways, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And if you can answer that question, then you could work backwards around thinking whether academia or industry or finding an internship to try something different. All of that in many ways, I think stems from who you are, who you want to be. You can make a difference in the world, whether you're in academia or industry or something completely different, scientific communications, whatever it might be. But I think that which one might be best for you is more a question of where you see yourself and your role and your aspiration in the world.
That is something that a lot of students have to take into consideration. And like you said, I think the Amgen and the foundation actually provides that ability for students. So like you said, Scott, they can pursue that for a while, but then after that, maybe they decide to pursue something completely different. And Amgen allows you that liberty to actually pursue specific things and see if you're good at it, if you want to pursue it, if you like it in general, but also have that initial mindset of just going through within systemic education and seeking answers and seeking knowledge in general. So I hope that also answers your question. We have a question from Hannah. Hannah asks, in your experience, has more progress been made with regards to STEM research in industry or in academia?
I think the general answer to that, I'm probably not the best one to answer that question. But when it comes to basic research, that has been so fundamental to many of the discoveries happening in industry. You're going to find that more in academia. You're going to find that more in government. When it comes to the application of that research to solve problems where you can leverage biology and chemistry and other fields to create something, whether that's a medicine in the biopharmaceutical industry or that's solar panels when it comes to the environment, you're going to find more of that application in industry. So I don't think it's that one has better than the other. It's more that there are in the ecosystem of innovation, if you will. Academia has a role to play, government has a role to play, industry has a role to play. Sometimes those roles overlap, and in other cases they don't overlap. You're not going to ask a university in Europe to undertake clinical phase 3 trials for something, right? That will be led. Now there might be trials happening at a university, but that's something that industry does, or manufacturing a biologic medicine at scale. Well, there's other things that are basic research, it's fundamental, that can lead one day to discoveries and medicines. But that if it's really not connected to any practical application, you might not, even though the biopharmaceutical industry does a lot of research, you're going to find less of that in industry than you will in academia. And so it's almost like there's just different parts of the ecosystem that ultimately needs to lead to more innovation for all of us, to serve all of us.
It will serve, like you said, it will serve all of us. It will be impacting each of us. So that aspect of how everybody goes about STEM education in industry and academia is very reflective of how future progress will be made and how it will actually be initialized by many students that are currently in school. So Hannah, I hope that answers your question. We have another question from Tatiana. Tatiana asks, what is one thing you wish you knew before going into your profession?
One thing I wish I knew. I guess I would point out things like this, how interconnected we all are with respect to the aspiration to make a difference, the aspiration to find meaning. This is fantastic, right? I'm sitting here in Los Angeles. You're in Bosnia. We're doing an event together. We have platforms that I hope can help to make a difference. And yet I think a lot of folks growing up, you're so focused on you and your community and your country, whatever it is. And COVID, if anything, has certainly shown the world how connected we are. Obviously, there's so many things we need to do a better job as a world with respect to that. But I think I always understood to a degree how connected we are and how much everyone everywhere seeks a better life for their children, seeks meaning. But I think that in my role, and now I've had an even better chance to engage with folks from all walks of life and in many places, and many of us seek many of the same things. What is Amgen? At the end of the day, we're trying to improve the human condition, and we make medicines to do so. The foundation is trying to improve the number of people that can participate in that in a meaningfully way, and to democratize that. And that's a big problem. The world is not at the best place right now when it comes to everyone having the opportunity to engage in science. And I hope this effort can reach more people alone and making them aware of some of the resources that are out there.
It goes back to the point you initially made about most Nobel Prize winners coming from America. It's not for the fact that diversity isn't reflective of no one else does anything that's relevant to education and STEM in general, but it's more for the fact that knowledge has to be made available, accessible to everyone. And it's a beautiful endeavor done by Amgen, the foundation, so that everyone and anyone can have anything available right at their fingertips pertaining to STEM education.
And Isla, I would add, that's one of the things about lab exchange that maybe I didn't touch on, but education and knowledge in some ways in our world is seen as, there's the broadcast model, right? There's the Harvard and these other great universities, or even countries sometimes, and it's going one way, right? They're saying something and everyone else is listening. The theory behind lab exchange is that's wrong. It needs to be two-way. And so the reason you can go on to lab exchange and literally publish and put up your own content to share with others is that it's the broadcast model, the idea that it just goes one way, is wrong. We need a greater diversity of voices and opinions and perspectives. And therefore, but you need the tools to do that, right? So lab exchange is meant to create an online community where it can go both ways. I mean, we know one of the issues with the lack of diversity in science, whether by sex or gender or nationality, is that certain issues don't get the exposure and the research funding and agenda because they're not, we saw that over time, speaking about the US, with certain issues that affect women, but there weren't women in leadership roles, and you see that with certain issues that might affect certain countries, but there's not enough research going into those issues. So again, as we increase the diversity and representation of scientific field at large, we're going to be better positioned to advance every issue, not just those issues that might be of concern to a particular country or two.
It's definitely going back to everything that we touched about, mostly for the fact that specific communities, specific countries, and specific groups of people have to be involved in STEM for that impact to be palpable. In essence, we can't see a difference if there's constantly the same profile of individuals within the important roles that are taken up within the STEM community. So I think that's also touching upon the fact that how everything is changing as we go on, as we move on within everything STEM related. So Tatiana, I hope that answers your question. Dad has another question. He asks, my last question would be, how did the development of Amgen look like? What were your biggest challenges, and what would be the advice for future scholars when they start working more in science?
You cut out for the second at the beginning. How was the development of the Amgen Foundation? Did I hear that right?
Yes. How was that like initially?
I guess what I would say is that while the foundation's been around for 30 years, me and the current team might say we've been around for about half of that, right? Most of us started in 2003, 2004, 2005. The foundation, I would say, over the years has switched from being reactive to being proactive. And I think that's a very good thing, right? When you're in philanthropy, There's going to be a lot of folks reaching out from a lot of different places, all that do great things, and you can't do everything, right? You don't want to give every organization a little bit. So as we've figured out exactly what we want to do, it's helped us to figure out what's in scope, what's out of scope, and then again, focus, which I spoke about earlier. We've then proactively gone about finding the right partners to do what we do. And I think that sea change enables us to have a greater impact, enables us to speak about that impact in a measurable way, in a different way. And I think that move has been a purposeful one that has made us a stronger foundation in terms of the impact we hope to achieve. So that's the one item I would call out. I could talk about the development of the foundation for a while, but time-wise, I will focus on that point alone.
Yes, it's very, like the point you made about your team getting involved at a certain time frame. It's very important for how that progress has moved up from 2021 now, currently the year we're in, and how that progress will affect for everything further down the line. So that, I hope that answers your question. And we have another question from Jenna. Jenna says, the panel is very interesting. I'm curious, is there a lot of interest for this program on the Balkans, and is it becoming more widespread?
In which program was it, or?
She didn't specify. I'm guessing the Amgen Scholars program.
Yeah, there is a lot of interest for the program. You know, every university gets a lot of applications every year, but you know, I would encourage you to check it out if you're interested. While there are many applicants for these programs, you know, finding programs and like this and applying is something that is, you know, I in my mind worth pursuing. But you know, recognize that that takes time, and it would be wrong of me to say that there isn't a lot of interest in something like Amgen Scholars. There's a lot of interest, but you know, by all means, go for it.
But we touched upon this previously about how the Amgen Scholars program will benefit the individuals that are involved, but it's also very selective in a sense, because not every university can take up all of the applications, and the amount of applications that come in is insurmountable in many ways. So it's very interesting how lab exchange works as a, like, it works as a double arm for specific cases within. It's connected, but it's also, I would guess, in my specific opinion, I think it's more relevant, and a lot of people should be aware of lab exchange and Khan Academy and all of these online platforms that Amgen provides specifically for that reason, due to it being accessible and students being able to practice research and discover things that they otherwise would not. So from the Q&A, I believe that's all of the questions. We have, I believe, a question in the chat. So Rasam asks, Scott, does your foundation support a makerspace concept in order to disseminate STEM education?
I think the makerspace movement, if you will, is wonderful. You have a lot of funders that are very focused on makerspaces. I can't point to specific grants that the Amgen Foundation has made. We've been a little more focused on biology and the life sciences, and a little less focused on engineering, but we know and recognize the importance of makerspaces, the importance of engineering. While we don't have a specific program around that, I think it's a wonderful movement that is integral in getting more young people to get their hands dirty and engaged in the scientific process.
I think that's all. Yes, that's all in the chat. I have a couple of them here on my phone that are coming from the YouTube stream. So Ahmed asks,
and I actually have, I probably have like 2 more minutes. I have something another meeting to get to, but please, I do have a couple more minutes.
No, it's totally fine. I completely understand. We went above the limit that we initially planned, but I would like to get on the first question that was asked here, and then that could be our general closing question. So Emmett asks, how does lab exchange differ from Khan Academy, and is it essentially the same concept that was presented within Amgen? That's
a little different. So Khan Academy has been around for 15 years. there's videos and exercises and assessments and a lot of things where you can engage in any subject. When you think about lab exchange, think about going really into depth in engaging in the scientific process. And so, simulations and some of those interactives, you're not going to find that type of content on Khan Academy. You'll find lots of other types of content. But when you think about lab exchange, think about being able to engage in the scientific process. Where are there videos and assessment? Yes, there are. But intermix, you also have, Khan Academy is a wonderful platform and it has lots of wonderful content from Khan Academy. Whereas Lab Exchange both is a publisher in terms of they create content, but it's also an aggregator. So you also have content from 100 other partners there. So it's probably a wider breadth of content, particularly around STEM learning, that you'll find on Lab Exchange. You also have the ability to create pathways and to run classes. And Khan Academy has a lot of other functionality too. So what I would say is they're both wonderful platforms. They operate a little bit differently in the time I have available to, I would probably leave it there in terms of how to go into it. But they're not kind of the same thing. They're both ways I think that can strengthen teaching and learning around the world. And on the Lab Exchange side, I say you can go into greater depth when it comes to science in particular.
Absolutely. I think it's important to understand a lab exchange is basically the amalgamation of data and information. It's all very pertinent in today's climate. So people have to be aware and students have to be aware of the fact that lab exchange is essentially a giant accumulation of information that is readily available to each one of you. So with that will be our last question. I would like to apologize for the rest of our viewers for not being able to, but of course the panel, the discussion actually in this entire interview was set up for that hour and a half, and I believe it's 11:37 right now where Scott is at in sunny California. So first of all, I would like to thank all of our viewers for participating in today's event. It was wonderful to have these questions and to have this open discussion with Scott, and how I know it's very important for students here at the Balkans and Bosnia more specifically to have to be made aware of the fact that Amgen as a foundation, actually, it's not just a leading biotech company. It's not just this huge unreachable moment that is present in America. It's actually present in 100 countries in many forms, in many ways, and it's present at all times on the internet. So I would encourage all of you to go to Lab Exchange, see the platform, see Khan Academy, see all the different programs and methods and applications that Amgen provides, either through the Amgen Scholars program or any other online platform. And now I would like to thank Scott for participating in today's event. I think it was very important to have you on as a guest, and that's why I specifically didn't set up this as a panel discussion and more of an interview, because I knew that the interest would be sparking everyone's attention. So in general, for the entire foundation, the BH Future Foundation, I would like to thank you for participating. I know that your vacation is coming up, so it's we're really thankful that you took up the time to talk to us currently, because it is the middle of summer, and this was wonderful for me, and I think for all of our scholars at the foundation and every other participant that decided to join us.
Well, it was wonderful for me too, and so thank you, and thank the BH Futures Foundation on behalf of myself and the foundation. We really appreciate the opportunity to engage today. I said earlier, you can have the greatest programs or websites or other things, but if no one knows about them, no one leverages them, you're not having an impact. So I really appreciate you taking the time and your audience taking the time to learn about some of what we're doing today. And I wish you the best as an Amgen Scholar this summer, Isla.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be a part of both the BH Futures Foundation and the Amgen Foundation. It's really been great having you on. So with that, we will be signing off. And again, thank you everyone. Thank you, Scott. And we will see you in our next panel discussion. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Stay safe.